Hello dear viewers. Banned from Atlanta, challenges of the unique trial of young gangsters. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and share for more exclusive content, thank you. The rapper was released from prison last week after a surprise guilty plea. For 15 years, a strict set of requirements has governed his life and music. One of the most prominent rappers of his generation is no longer welcome in Atlanta. After pleading guilty last Thursday to a nearly 3-year-old conspiracy and racketeering case, musician Young Thug, born Jeffery Williams, was given 48 hours to leave the Atlanta metropolitan area, as determined by the Bureau of Census of the United States, for the future. Once a leading figure in Atlanta's growing music scene, Mr. Williams, 33, can now return only briefly, under strict circumstances. For anti-gun and anti-gang presentations, he is expected to perform to local youth 4 times a year, or for weddings, funerals, graduations or medical emergencies of members of their immediate family. Banning Mr. Williams from his hometown was just one of 12 special conditions he agreed to as part of a plea deal that allowed him to be released from jail that evening. But can an international hip-hop star pick up where he left off under a rigorous new set of rules that could reshape his lyrics, his personality and his band of collaborators? Experts say the length and intensity of Mr. Williams' probation could lead to long-term complications, given the scope of his profession and the vagueness or subjective nature of some of the rules that now govern his life. The judge in the case, who was given discretion to decide the sentence because Mr. Williams' lawyers and prosecutors could not agree on a sentence even though he pleaded guilty, ruled that he would be sentenced to 15 years in prison and another 20 years in prison. Test if you violate the agreement. Along the way, Mr. Williams must agree to be screened at all times, submit to random drug tests, refrain from promoting gangs in any way, and avoid association with known gang members, with the exception of his brother, to the musician Quantavious Greer. Known as Unfunk, and Sergio Kitchens, or Ghana, a rapper signed to the label of Mr. Williams. Mr. Greer and Mr. Kitchens pleaded guilty in the same case before trial. Mr. Williams faced up to 120 years in prison if convicted of the charges against him, which include conspiring to violate Georgia racketeering laws and running his YSL team as a criminal gang. He pleaded not guilty to those charges and guilty to 6 other charges, including engaging in criminal street gang activity and possessing drugs and an illegally modified machine gun. "You don't often see probation for these kinds of charges," said Fiona Doherty, a professor at Yale Law School who has written about the probation system. "These are kind of supercharged conditions of probation, as a plea bargaining tool to get out of prison." Because of that, Ms. Doherty added, the person doesn't have a lot of leverage, and they chose to subject themselves to conditions that make them very vulnerable to incarceration going forward. She pointed to Mr. Williams's waiving of his Fourth Amendment rights, allowing the search of his person, residence, vehicles, and electronics at any time, even without reasonable suspicion, which invites enormous policing powers during these 15 years, Ms. Doherty said. That is a very significant decision to give up those rights. It's not uncommon to see that in the probation context, but it just shows how people on probation have deeply limited freedom compared to other people. A lawyer for Mr. Williams, Brian Steele, said after sentencing last week that he would have preferred to hold out for a jury verdict, but that the much-delayed trial, already the longest in Georgia history, was holding this man hostage. His client had even rejected an earlier deal from prosecutors, Mr. Steele said, that would have let him out of custody because they would have a tether around him so tight that it's unconscionable. But the ruling by the Fulton County judge, Paige Reese Whitaker, came with its own strictures, raising concerns that even by performing his previously released music, some of which was used as evidence, Mr. Williams could be seen as violating the condition that he not use any hand sign, terminology, or language that promotes or represents any criminal street gang, directly or indirectly. At trial, his trademark subject matter and go-to slang, like slat and slime, were repeatedly linked to gang culture. Judge Whitaker said in court that while the rap industry resembled a modern-day version of WWE wrestling, complete with posturing and exaggeration, it has tremendous impact on kids and young people who think, "This is cool, this is what I want to do." In a media appearance last week, Keith Adams, another lawyer for Mr. Williams, said his client has got to be careful, adding, "There are clearly some lyrics in previous songs that make reference to YSL, and I think he's going to have to be a bit more careful about what he does in regards to that." Still, the vagueness of the rules could prove challenging, said James M. Binnall, a professor of law and criminology at California State University, Long Beach, who focused on probation and parole. If you describe your criminal lifestyle as a member of a street gang in the past, that's different from promotion, right? He said. Is it allowed to describe this life? Is this a promotion? He cannot fulfill these conditions if he does not know what is allowed and what is not allowed. Mr. Binnall said such issues, while they could be addressed in future probation modification applications, could create a situation where it will be almost impossible for him to comply with all these rules for 15 years.